We're good? Hi, everyone. Welcome to this new course. I'm excited about it. This is an 8-week program, so if you've been parts of the last courses, you know how this works, but if you haven't, welcome. This is the first one, and each session lasts about an hour. These are recorded also, so if you can't make it to the live event, you can always rewatch it on the website, and I'd recommend that you actually rewatch it, even if you are part of this. Sometimes you might catch something that you missed during the live event. Hopefully, we won't have any glitches tonight, but it should be pretty smooth. We're used to this. We're pros, so it should all be good. This is kind of an interactive course, meaning that if you have questions at any point, you're welcome to ask them. So, like Chad mentioned, ask your questions in a live stream, right? Okay. So just ask your questions in live stream, and we'll keep an eye on it, and I'll take some of those questions. And you're also more than welcome to contact me through Jamplay directly. Just send me a message, and I'm always happy to have feedback or questions or suggestions, and those are great too. And last thing I want to mention is that you get a backing track with today's session. With every session, you're going to get a new backing track, sometimes more than one. And I strongly recommend that you take some of the ideas that we're talking about during these live events and apply them over the backing tracks if you can. And there's a growing collection on Jamplay, a lot of different backing tracks, a lot of different genres, different keys, and experiment with those. Use those backing tracks as canvases on which you're painting over. That's kind of how I like to approach improvisation in general. You're not wanting to cover completely the painting, but you're painting over what's already there. You're having a musical conversation with those backing tracks. So that's kind of the idea here. This workshop is about pentatonic scales, and we're going to try to, first of all, get you to a place where you can play all those positions, those pentatonic scales all over the fretboard, and then quickly get outside of actually thinking in terms of shapes, positions, and slices of the fretboard. Because if you do that, if you only think in terms of shapes and all that, then your music, the things you're going to say musically on your instruments, are going to be limited by the shapes that you know or that you're comfortable with. And that's why a lot of players kind of gravitate around that first position, which we're going to talk about today. But that first position has the particularity that some of the bends that you can do in that position always fall in the same intervals, the same types of notes. And that's why your solos might all kind of sound like the same. Those kind of licks, which work, those are great, but don't want to limit yourself to that. There's a lot more that you can say musically, and we're going to explore those different ideas together. The key thing to take out of these 8 courses, is to kind of transfer all those position knowledge, scales, and all those different things, to transfer those into your fingers so that you don't have to think about the actual shape and position. Your fingers know where to go automatically, and then quickly get out of that where you can take control over your fingers and not just let your fingers mindlessly go towards their comfort zones, but make the music inside, and then use all those shapes that we're going to cover in the next 8 weeks as ways to express yourself just freely. It's just like learning a new language. If I'm learning a new language, first I'm going to really try to understand how to make all those new sounds. And it's going to be a very mechanical approach where I'm thinking about the way I put my tongue to get this particular sound in this new language. I always refer to French, which is my first language. So the R is from the throat, and that's not a sound that we have in English. So if English is your first language, you're learning French, and you want to make that sound, you've got to, like in your throat, think about, okay, how do I do that? And then first you're Words are going to be very mechanical because you're thinking about all those things. And then eventually you don't have to think about the positioning of your throat, your tongue, and all that, and you're just speaking. And the parallel in music is if you're thinking in terms of shapes too much, that's like thinking of how do I make those sounds? How do I put my throat and my tongue and my cheeks to make those sounds? And that limits your speech because it's a very technical type of speech where you're really thinking about all those sounds. Whereas if you can get away from it, away from the positions and the shapes, then you're just speaking musically, which right now I don't know which shape I'm in, but I'm imagining the sounds inside. And so I know exactly what is going to be said musically. I'm not saying that it's a great musical statement, but what I'm saying is that I have control over it, and that's what I want us to get to. So why a course on pentatonic scales? Because there's a lot more scales out there. First, we need to understand that every scale can be seen as an alphabet, a series of notes or a series of letters from which we could extract certain notes to make licks and words and sentences and ideas. So scales are like alphabets, and there's a lot of alphabets. There are complex alphabets, maybe more sophisticated alphabets, more simplistic alphabets. And the penta scale, the pentatonic scale, is more of a simplistic alphabet, but I don't mean it in a bad way. I just mean that there are 5 letters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just 5 notes in a penta scale. Penta comes from 5, as opposed to a diatonic scale, which has 7 notes. So between 5 notes and 7 notes, while the one that's going to produce more complex ideas is the one with the more notes in it, the 7-note scale. So the penta scale is an easier scale or alphabet to use to communicate, but that's not the only thing, the only reason. The actual notes of the pentatonic scale, of the minor pentatonic scale, are strong notes. If we analyze what kind of notes we have, and we're going to consider a minor pentatonic scale, there's also major pentatonic scales. Within the minor pentatonic scale, if we looked at the 5 notes that make that scale, root, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, minor seventh, those are the types of notes. Those are notes that are found in a lot of chords, a lot of different chords, and they're really strong notes. The root is found in every chord. Every chord has a root. That's the foundation. So that's a strong note. The minor third is a very strong note too, because that determines the nature of a musical element. Whether it's a chord or key, a scale, the third determines if that's major or minor. So that's a strong note. The next note we found is the fourth, and that's the fourth is kind of another really strong note. It goes along with the fifth. The fourth and the fifth are really strong notes because if you were to play a note with its fourth, and you were to analyze the harmonics of these notes, like every note has a waveform, you would see that these waveforms kind of align together and they resonate really well together. Same with the fifth. So 2 other strong notes. And the minor seventh is another strong note. It's found in most minor chords. If you were to add a seventh to a minor chord, it would be minor seventh usually as opposed to major seventh, which is more rare. So if you have not followed that, don't worry about it. That's not the main topic here. I just wanted to let you know why these notes are really strong and why the pentatonic scale is such a useful scale to use. Because those notes are super strong, and if you were to make words, licks, using these 5 notes, you would have very strong words that people would remember. The difference between speaking with a penta scale and a diatonic scale, 7-note scale, is kind of the difference between a 5-year-old who's talking and an adult who's talking. So I'm not saying it in the way that the adult way of speaking is better than the kid. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that if you were to express yourself with the pentascale, your words, your licks, would go to the essential aspect to really communicate what you have to communicate. Whereas if you want to add more details, express the same idea, but with more details, you would use the 7-note scale. That's kind of the parallel. So don't take that out of context by thinking that I'm saying that playing pentatonic is not good and not expressive. Not at all. That's not what I mean at all. It's just less options, but you can be very expressive with that. So we're going to talk about positions, which is the work that we're going to do to really get those scales under our fingers so that eventually we can get out of it, not have to think about those positions and express ourselves. But positions are important to get started. What are positions? Positions are slices, virtual slices of the fretboard. So if I were to, and you can see the charts, by the way, there's some charts that you can download for today's lesson. I don't know if we have them on screen. Great, yeah, let's give that a try. Awesome. Okay, so if we look at this scale there, A minor pentatonic, A is the root. What is a root? A root is the starting point. It's the note from which all the other notes are measured to. So if you play a note by itself, that's just a sound. It doesn't really mean much. That note needs to be played in reference to something else. If I play it according to that root, then that note has a particular meaning. It's different than just hearing that note. So yes, a note can have a lot of different meanings. It can mean this. Just by changing the root, same note, can have a lot of different meanings. But you need two notes to have a meaning. A note by itself is nothing. It's just a sound. So that's what the root is, and that's that red note. So the root is the reference. In this case, it's A. So if we're playing over an A minor chord, well, that A is the actual root. And we have 5 notes. You can see that if you were to look at the actual names of the notes, we have the R, which is for root. Then we have a B3, flat 3, minor 3rd. That's the second note. The next note is a 4th. Next one is a 5th. Next one is a flat 7th. And then we go back to the root. So 5 notes. And on our instrument, we can play the same exact notes on different strings, different frets. And that's why you see that there's a repetition of these notes. There's not, I don't just have 5 dots on my fretboard. Anytime I have one of those roots, those red notes, I'm putting a dot on my fretboard. And there's a lot of red notes, the R's. A lot of minor thirds, a lot of fourths, a lot of fifths, and a lot of minor sevenths. And if we do that all over a blank fretboard, it's difficult to memorize. So imagine that you see that and you've got to play and you might be confused. So instead of having this big fretboard with all these dots to memorize, we're splitting our fretboard into narrower slices. And usually the slices are determined by the width that you can do between the index and the pinky. And usually, if you use 1 finger per fret, that's 4 frets apart, because there's 4 fingers there. And so these slices are taking like that. So you've got one slice, another slice here, another one here, and so forth. And what we see here on the chart, the colored notes, the full notes, are one slice of the fretboard. And that slice happens between frets 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 8, 6, 7, 8, right there. And that fits our rule where we have 1 finger per fret. Index is on 5, middle is on 6, ring on 7, pinky on 8. And that's our first slice of the fretboard, right there. That's position number 1. That's what positions are. Positions are slices, virtual slices of the fretboard. So if I play, let's say that I'm imagining that I have a different slice this time, and if I play in that different slice, am I still playing an A minor pentatonic? Yes. It's not the slice that determines the scale or the key. The slice is just an area of the fretboard, but because each slice is made of the same exact 5 notes, then you're still playing the same exact key with the same exact scale. It's not the slice that determines anything. Slices are just to facilitate that memorization. There's a danger, and we talked about it a little bit in the intro of this course. There's a danger if you think in terms of slices only. The danger is that if we think in terms of slice, if I look at that first slice that we had, notice that we have 2 notes on each string. So, and if I look at my guitar, I have a left note and a right note, and that's something important. We're going to talk about that. Those are the exterior notes. So on the left side, we have frets 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, just 5. 5th fret all the time. That's with the index. So that's easy. We already know half of our first position of the minor pentatonic scale by doing this. We're not going to play it as a chord, 1 note at a time, but all the left side notes, from your perspective, are on fret number 5. And on the right side, we either have fret number 8 or 7. If it's 8, it's going to be with the pinky. If it's 7, with the ring. So you've got 5, 8, index, pinky. 5, 7, index, ring. 5, 7, index, ring again. 5, 7, index, ring. 5, 8, index, pinky. And 5, 8, index, pinky. That rule of sticking to 1 finger per fret, it doesn't really matter. I'm just saying that to memorize the shape and to get a workout. But when you're actually playing, nobody cares if you're using your pinky or ring or middle. It doesn't matter. It sounds the same. So keep that in mind too. Don't be too stuck on a particular fingering. It doesn't matter. But the danger that I was mentioning earlier, the danger of thinking in terms of shapes all the time is that eventually your fingers are going to take some freedom, some liberties, by maybe vibrating a certain string. And you'll notice that, or maybe bending a string. And you'll notice that usually the notes on which we're adding some effects are the right side notes. So if on my first position, that's frets 8, 7, 7, 7, 8, 8. Why is that? If you think about it, it's because all the right side notes are played with the pinky or the ring, and the pinky or the ring can be preceded by the middle or the index. In other words, if I'm adding a vibrato effect on the 3rd string, 1, 2, 3, 7th fret. By the way, the high E string there, that's string number 1. So 1, 2, 3, 7th fret. I can always help that ring for the vibrato by placing my middle on 1 fret below, same string, and index 1 fret below, same string. That's more control. And you'll find that your fingers kind of automatically tend to add some effects on those right side notes. Because you can help your ring with the other fingers like that. If I played on my left side, that's index only, 5. And the 5 is the only one involved in vibrato or a bend, and that's hard. That's harder than 3 fingers at a time. And because of that, that means that these notes that we're playing, 8, 7, 7, 7, 8, 8, they're intervals. They have different functions in our scale. In this case, 8 is minor 3rd, 5th, root, 4th, minor 7th, 4th. Those are the intervals that are always going to kind of like be heard with an effect. And that's why all your licks kind of sound the same. Because you're adding some effects to the right side. And this lick is a good example. How many times have we heard that? A lot of times. You see the bend is on the right side, from my perspective, and another bend on the right side again. Whereas if I trained myself to do some bends with my index, it would open a whole new world. it sounds already a little bit more open. So that's to illustrate the danger of thinking only in terms of positions and letting your fingers improvise on their own without having control over them. Do I have a question or something?
We do have one, and I just want to make a quick announcement for anyone that's having trouble with the chat. Our jam chat is not letting some people access it. And so if you can't get on there, go ahead and get on live stream. And if you have a question, go ahead and get on live stream because I cannot see the jam chat either right now. So if you have any questions, get them on there. And we do have one that popped up a little bit ago.
Okay.
It's directly related to this chart from 1964 Mustang. Why are some of the R notes in a solid red circle and others are just red circles?
Yeah, good question. Let's go back to that chart. And in that chart, we have a minor pentatonic scale, the 5 notes that are all over the fretboard. And the solid notes just show you the first slice of the fretboard. That's why we have solid red notes, just to show that that's the slice. It's slice number 1. And thanks for, I didn't quite finish my thought earlier. I forgot. Slice number 1 is position number 1 because it starts with the first note of the minor pentatonic scale. On the bottom left, you see that's a red note. So root that's slice number 1. Those are the solid notes. Anything outside is not solid because I'm not showing those slices. But if I were to show slice number 2, then we'd have a different set of notes that would be solids. But that's why. Good question. Did we have another chart for today, or was it for next week? I can't remember.
Yeah, we have some other pentatonic licks.
Okay. If we could show those on the screen, if you have them. Great. So I have a few words for you, a few licks, ideas. These licks are kind of going to illustrate a little bit some of the ideas that we can play with at first position. And actually, you know what? Let's take that chart off. We're going to just practice a little bit that position to get in on our fingers. So 2 notes per string, okay? And a left note and a right note. And we're going to just ascend and descend that position. We'll play 2 notes per beat. So if this is our beat, we'll play 2 notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, just to get used to the sound of that. And as you're doing this, think of the left, right concept. And your hand should not shift much because we're always starting on that 5th string, so there's no shift of movement. That's another advantage of positions. It's all controlled in a narrow area of the fretboard like that, so that's what we like. As you're doing this, if you do that 5 minutes, you should have a really good idea of what comes next. And you can almost sing that. And just imagine how that next note would sound like. Okay, we're going to try something else. This time, on the same pentatonic scale, I'm going to record a loop that is going to bring out that root, which is A. It's a minor pentatonic, therefore I can extract from it a minor chord. I'm just going to record a simple loop, and over it we'll play that pentatonic scale. It's going to be easier to solidify our ears so that we can hear what's going on over that chord. So here's my loop. That's our tempo. And we'll play one note per beat. Let's try something different. We're going to play 4 notes. 4 notes again from this string. So that kind of helps us have that scale in context and hear what's going on in the back. That's why the backing track is so important too. You can download that. Let's now look at some licks. And hopefully these licks are going to give you some ideas, and I'll give you some homework on that first position. The first lick is just 1 bar. And if we look at the rhythm section, we see that we have 4 different elements. The first element is a triplet. So 1, 2, 3, da, da, da. That's 3 notes per beat. Da, 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 da. That's for the first element. The second element is a quarter note, so da, 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 da. And then we have a triplet again and a quarter note. But the second quarter, the second beat there, is tied to the first triplet. So rhythmically it would be something like this. If this is our tempo, 3, 4, we'd have da 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 da. Da, 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 something like that. Now let's tie the notes to it. All these notes are going to fall into that first position of the minor pentatonic. First we have a bend for that first note of that triplet on the 7th fret, and you see that's the lazy bend, the bend that falls on the right side. So this lick is purely directed by our fingers. We're not really taking over, we're just generating the lick from the comfort zones that are found with the use of these positions. So the first 3 notes, we got that bend, 7th fret, 3rd string. We can help our ring finger with a middle just below and the index just below. And when you're bending that, you see the indication on top of the arrow, it says full. That's a full step. Steps are ways to determine the distance between 2 notes. And the smallest distance is between 2 frets, and that's a half step. So if a half step is 1 fret, a full step is 2 frets. So the indication of the full bend there means that that bend, the 7th fret, when we bend it, should sound like 2 frets higher, which is the 9th fret. That's a full step. So you kind of need to get used to how much strength to use when you're bending that so that it reaches that 9th fret. Then on the 2nd string we have fret number 5, that's the index. 1st string, fret number 5, index. Just like that. Then we have another bend on the 2nd string, 8th fret. Same thing, we'll use our ring here. And we can help that ring finger with the middle just below and the index just below. That's another full step bend. So the 8 should sound like 10. Three more notes. The first note is on the 1st string, 5th fret. All that is purely pentatonic scale first position. The second note is 2nd string, 8th fret. You can use your pinky or your ring, it doesn't matter. And the last note is on the 2nd string, 5th fret. And that wave on the top, that's a vibrato. You're vibrating that string a little bit. And rhythmically, remember it's da 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 da. Now if we try that in context, I'm going to record another quick loop here. We'll try something like this. context. One, two, three, four. One, two. Okay, so that's a lick that's purely extracted from that first position of the minor pentatonic scale. There's a lot that you can find kind of using those comfort zones, and that's, again, just generated by the scale. You're not singing an idea and reproducing it yet. You're just getting comfortable with the scale. And then all these bends that you're using on the right side are going to be bended with the ring finger, and you can help yourself with the middle and index and wrap your thumb around, give you more grippage, more control for these kinds of bends. It's something else that we can try with these bends, and that's not bending the right side note, so left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, but bending one fret below the right side note. So, yes, these notes are not part of the pentatonic scale. Just one note below that's not in the pentatonic. But we can make them right by bending them to reach one fret higher, and that's a half step bend. So instead of playing, for this exercise, instead of playing left note, right note, we're going to play left note, which is always on fret number 5, right note -1, and bend that a half step. And the fingering is going to be this. If we're bending the 7th fret, we'll use the ring. If we're bending the 6th fret, such as it's the case on the 5th string, we'll use the middle finger. So again, if we're bending fret number 7, ring finger. If we're bending fret number 6, middle finger. Make sure it's a half step bend. If you bend too high, it's going to be out. So the exercise sounds like that. I bended directly and played the note. So I pre-bended and played that note because I kind of know how much pressure or how much strength to bend that so it sounds like one fret higher. But if you're unsure, if you're just starting out, you could start from the note one fret below and hear that progression of the bend. We're not worried about rhythm right now, we're just worried about pitch, so that your bend really sounds like the note you're trying to reach. And you can just kind of check too. Start with the note you're trying to reach, one fret below, bend it, and check with yourself. Is that similar sound? Is it too low? If it's too low, more pressure, and do that a few times to get it just right. If it's too high, just adjust it. And that's why adding some vibrato at the end is going to help, because vibrato is basically a note that you're playing and you're surrounding that note with higher pitches and lower pitches, like that, like a wave. That's what a vibrato is, and you're suggesting the proper pitch. Let's try that over our track here, our backing track, which I deleted, so I'll record another one. Try something like this. Then we'll try it over the real backing track, but let's try something like this. So play notes. Let's try that again. Okay, now let's try 3 notes. The left note, the right note, and then the bend to sound like the right. Just embedding into our fingers all those ideas so that they're second nature, and getting comfortable at the same time with the sound of that scale. Okay, so that's the idea here. Just making a bunch of different exercises so that we're comfortable with the pentatonic scale, knowing where the strong notes are. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And if we do that during this session, at the end of the session, you'll have that kind of embedded in your mind. You'll know how the pentatonic scale sounds, and if you do the exercise of putting your guitar down and playing and singing over the backing track, your ideas are going to be most likely generated from that pentatonic scale that we're playing right now. We're programming our fingers to get the info, then we'll take control over them. Let's try another one in the same idea. This time, instead of half bending, so bending a half step to reach the right side note, we'll do a half bend to reach the left side note. So all left side notes are on the 5th string, right? So that first position. So we're going to bend string, or fret number 4, a half step. Again, you can check, you just play the landing note, and then the bend. Make sure that it sounds okay. And for this, we'll bend that fourth fret, and then play the right side note. So you'll notice at some point you're going to have to change direction of your bend. If you're starting on the low string, your bend is going to go towards the ground. If it doesn't, you're slipping out. And once you reach that 3rd or 2nd string, you're going to have to bend towards the sky this time to avoid slipping out like that. Okay, so the exercise, bend the left side to reach the proper note and play the right side. It's very Jeff Becky, especially if you add your vibrato. So let's try that. Same track. And we'll try 2 notes per beat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Let's now half the speed if that's a little too fast. Just 1 note per beat. 4. One more time. So I'll hit the band in the wrong direction. It sounds a little off, but it also has its charm. Now let's try the same thing, but this time we'll bend the left, the 4th fret, and we'll bend to the right. So really we're not playing any notes, we're not starting any notes from the actual note of the pentatonic scale. We're starting each note 1 fret below and bending a half step above. It's exactly like playing that first position, 1 fret below, and each note making them right. It'll sound a little kind of like a it has a little drunk flavor to it. Like it's not exactly precise, but it still kind of makes sense. So we'll try that. We'll try one note per beat. 2, 3. One more time. And if you're feeling confident, you don't have to start with the outside and bend it. Just pre-bend and play the note and check. Okay, let's go back to our tabs. There's an idea that kind of uses that in a more musical way. And that is idea number 4. Let's take a look at that one. You see that there are 2 triplets, 2 series of triplets. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Those are the first 6 notes. And that 6th note is falling on the 6th fret of the 3rd string. That note is not in our position, but it's bending that. You see half after the bend, half step. So that 6 sounds like a half step above, or 1 fret above, which is the 7th fret. So that's that last note. And we're starting with just descending our pentatonic scale from the 2nd string, 8th fret, 5th, 3rd string, 7th fret. Then we'll go on the 4th string, 7th fret, back to the 3rd string, 5th fret. And then that's our bend. And in our tempo, 1, da, da, 2, da, da, 3, da, da, 4. That's our idea. It's a little more musical than what we were doing earlier. But you see that we can use that musically. Let's go to try over the backing track here that is included in your lesson. This is an A. It's a blues type of thing, a slower backing track. Our tempo, very slow tempo. You can triplet that. 1, 2, 3, 1. You actually hear that. 1, 2, 3, 1. So that gives you a better idea for how those lick are going to sound like. Let's try that. Okay, so that's our idea. What if we replaced that last bend with similar effects, but on the 2nd string to reach that 8th fret? So we're bending from 1 fret below, which is 7. Instead of what's written. Both are great. Both work. We're just replacing that last bend with a similar one on a different string. 4th string. Let's try it on the 5th. That works too. Okay, so that's the idea. Taking some of these licks, recycling them, make words with them by extracting from the ideas one of the techniques that we're using, like a pre-bend, bending to a right note, and making words with that. Okay, now comes the fun part, and hopefully you're there. If not, you can rewatch this lesson or use the actual practice session, which I'll talk to you about in a few minutes. The fun part is, over this backing track, we should now be used to what kind of language is being used there. It's the minor pentatonic scale. We have that in our mind. So the fun part is over this backing here, you just put your guitar down, and I've done that in the promo video, so hopefully you've seen it. If not, sorry, or if you have seen it, I'm repeating myself, but it's so important. Put the guitar down because that breaks the natural inclination that you're going to have to start playing. And when you're starting playing, you're going to start with those positions, and you're locking your mindset into position thinking. Now it's just music, it's just you, the backing track, and if you approach this like a singer would, just try to imagine something simple, like this. That's kind of what I'm hearing in my mind. Super simple. I'm doing that a few times to get used to it. I'm going to take that idea, and because of the work we did previously, that idea should fall under the pentatonic scale. So I'm going to have to look around for that. There it is. Yep. That's that lick or that word, musical idea, works within our minor pentatonic scale because we're so used to it now after doing all these exercises. And that's exactly found in that first position. And now if I try that, make it more interesting than just with my voice. I can add some effects, some vibrato, maybe a bend, maybe play it with the fingers. Different pickup. Repeat a note. That's what will happen eventually, where you're singing without even putting the guitar down, and automatically that idea, that musical thought goes from the source to your through your fingers really, really fast. These are not licks. These are ideas that I'm having inside, and I'm reproducing them. Reproducing them automatically. Because as you're playing with these positions, if you're actively anticipating the sound of each note, you're associating sounds with muscle movements. And just like when you're learning a new language, you're associating sound in French with that particular throat thing, and then when you speak, you don't have to think about it anymore. That's the goal with these. I know we started a little late. I don't know what the actual jam play schedule is. Is just there someone after us? Okay. All right. So throughout the next 7 weeks, 7 sessions, we're going to explore different zones of the fretboard, apply what we learned today in these other zones, and then discover new simple ideas like that bending thing, and associating that with movements through different exercises. And at the end of week number 8, you should have a complete overview of all of these positions, and you hopefully won't think in terms of positions that much, but more of speaking musically using these scales. Positions are just the tools to reproduce that on your instrument. And we're going to explore different musical genres too, because the pentatonic is not only a blues scale, it's used in any musical genre, and that's what we're going to do. I mentioned a practice session, so along with each of these 8-week, hour-long live sessions, there is a pre-recorded practice session, which lasts maybe 30 minutes or so. And these go along with each of these sessions. So the practice session for this week that we just talked about should be up, or it will be tomorrow, but it's going to be in the practice this lesson once this is up on JamPlay. And you can watch that video, grab your guitar, don't pause the video, it lasts 30 minutes, you have 30 minutes of dedicated practice time, and just go through it. It's an all-inclusive type of practice thing. It's designed for those who want to have good quality practice session time, but don't really want to organize their session. Just play the video with the guitar, follow along, and we'll go over all these different licks and concepts and more ideas. There's a little bit more in those practice sessions for you to explore. The backing tracks should be used all the time, because without them, you're just playing on your own. There's no conversation that's being developed. And without playing over backing tracks or with a band or with a friend, then you're just, you're never going to learn how to listen. And listening and not speaking in a conversation is as important as speaking and responding to what's being said. It's an ongoing thing. So keep that in mind. If we have any questions, let's cover them.
Okay. Yeah, we've got a few. I apologize to everybody for now. We're having some trouble with live stream as well with our chat room on there. So I apologize if we've missed any. Just try to get them up there and hopefully we'll see them. But if not, it probably just is because they didn't load on there for some reason. So here we go. From Steve Jones, this one came in really early in the session. When using the pentatonic scale over 1, 4, 5 chord changes, do I just use the scale for the tonic or for each of the 3 chords?
Yeah, good question. You can do both. So the 1, 4, 5 chord progression is the blues chord progression that is heard a lot. And there are 2 types of 1, 4, 5 where we can deal with minor chords. So all 1, 4, 5 are minor chords. And A, that'll be A minor, D minor, E minor, or A major, D major, E major. Both are valid. Those are 1, 4, 5. For both of those, whether the first chord is major or minor, you can use a minor pentatonic scale. And we'll get into that too at some point in the course. I know that usually you want to stick to the same musical element. If you have a major chord, you're using a major scale, major pentatonic, major mode, minor chord, minor scale, minor pentatonic. You want to match the elements. Blues is different. You can always use a minor pentatonic scale. So you can either stick to the minor pentatonic scale throughout all the 3 different chords, or take each of the chord and associate with each of the chord the corresponding pentatonic scale. So if you have a minor blues, A minor, you play A minor pentatonic. D minor, you play D minor pentatonic. E minor, pentatonic. Or you can stick to your A minor pentatonic throughout. For major chords, and this is being recorded so you can rewatch the answer if I'm going too fast. For major chords, say A major. I can always use A minor pentatonic throughout the full thing. Or associate to each of the 3 chords the corresponding pentatonic, which would be A major pentatonic, D major, D major pentatonic, E major, E major pentatonic, E major pentatonic. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can do both.
Okay, here's one from Fred Green. At some point, I would appreciate it if you could cover left-hand strategies to eventually result in the smooth melodic licks. Not necessarily, in fact, not shredding, but smooth melodic moves.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's a very good question. I think the answer relies in 2 things. The first thing is not to start playing with your guitar. Just sing those lines and imagine how those lines would look like on paper. Is that line going up? Ba-da-ba-da-bum, or ba-da-ba-da-bum. Just imagine that movement. And then imagine the length of each of those without the guitar. You're just imagining that, having a complete overview of what that sounds like. And once you have that, grab your instrument and try to reproduce that. The second part of this, to create more smoother lines as opposed to just shreddy ideas, is to play a single note and really get comfortable with how it sounds with your pick, when you pick it towards the bridge, the neck. Sounds different. How much attack you're putting. And then the vibratos, are you vibrating right away? Is it a wide vibrato, a short vibrato, or play with the fingers? All those nuances are gonna make that distinction. So 2 things: find the idea without the guitar, and then reproduce that idea with your instrument, but adding those nuances. And then a tip would be on electric, not to have your volume all the way up and not to have your tone all the way up, but reduce it a little bit, maybe 3/4 for both. And that's going to give you more, a lot more options as far as when you're attacking a note. You can attack a note a lot softer, and if you attack it stronger, it's going to bring out almost a little bit of distortion depending on the tone you're having. But if your volume is all the way up, it's going to be, you're going to have less, a lesser range of options. So try that too, to get more used to the melodic type of playing. And lastly, I would recommend, if you haven't checked it out, the previous course, the previous live event, which we just finished last week, was about melodic playing too. So that's been recorded and that's available to you. It's an 8-week session in which we're talking about all that. So you should check it out too.
Okay, I've got one more here. Again, I apologize to anyone that asked a question, and it may just not be showing up because this is the last one I have. From Brent Godfrey: don't have prior bending experience, having difficulty getting a full bend. Do you need to bend 2 strings at once to get enough room?
Yeah. So yes, at some point when you're bending your string, let's say we're bending the 7th fret of the third string. As I'm bending that, if I bend towards the ground, the 2nd string is being caught, and if you just pay attention to that 2nd string, I know it's really thin, it's kind of hard to see, but you'll see that 2nd string is also being bended right there. Just pay attention to that 2nd string, and it's being caught. So yes, that's normal. The key to bending, I think, is to have your fingers on the fretboard flat. And I'm talking about electric. If you're on a classical guitar, that's not something you usually want to do. You want to have your fingers straight. But on electric, I found it way easier to have your fingers flat, even if you're playing alternate picking things, as opposed to straight. That gives you more surface to work with on the flesh here. And as you're bending this, you're going to have a lot more of the string touching your finger, and that's more grippage. And the idea too is, of course, not to slip out like that. And for that, you can always help your ring with the middle and X below. Have your thumb wrapped around the neck like that. And maybe instead of thinking in terms of, I want to go straight down like that, think of angling your fingers a little bit. See, they're not straight, they're angled like that. And the wrist in the back is kind of doing a roll type of thing like that. That kind of helps too. And same goes with bending towards the sky. You want to have your fingers a little bit flat and kind of angled like that instead of straight, kind of angled. But don't get discouraged. You will get it. It might not sound great first, but a little bit every day will go a long way with that. Good question too. If we miss some questions, we apologize. But you can email me, or you can leave your questions for next Monday. I'll be happy to answer those too. We should have everything figured out by then. Take a look at that practice session. Maybe run it 2-3 times next week and learn these licks and try to figure out some new ideas that you can use using some of these concepts. Next week, we're going to look at neighbor positions. So we're going to surround that first position with something that's happening on the right side, something that's on the left side. We'll talk about visual reference points too. It's going to be useful. And we'll continue expanding our comfort with the pentatonic scale, really programming our fingers to play them, and then we'll take control over them by singing over the track and trying to figure out new ways to use those. Anything that I forgot to add?
I'll just make a note that we appreciate everyone's patience with all the chat problems we've had tonight and sticking with us. If you want to view those archives, that's a feature that's available for members. So if you're watching for free, we are glad you're here. And if you want to watch it again, that's something you can do as a member of jamplay.com. So thanks everybody for your patience and hanging out with us tonight.
Yep. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week, same time, and I'll be on time next time. See you then.